Your wife faked her death. I know where she is.
She was soaking wet. Not dramatically wet. Not mourning wet where your hair stays perfect and your mascara runs in one elegant line. Actually wet. The kind of wet where your shoes make sounds. Where your backpack has gone a darker shade from water absorption. Where you have clearly been standing in Seoul rain for longer than any sensible person would choose. She was 19 years old, black, from Detroit, and she had exactly zero business being outside a charity gala in Gangnam. But there she was. And when Seo-Rin stepped through those glass doors, surrounded by 4 bodyguards, flanked by 2 black cars with engines already running, moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who had not stood still in public for longer than 30 seconds in a decade, she stepped directly into his path. Not to the side, not nervously from a distance, directly into his path. Security moved. Fast. The way trained men move when something breaks the pattern, hands out, bodies shifting, closing the gap between the threat and the man they were paid to protect. She didn't run, didn't flinch, didn't even blink at the wall of suited men suddenly between her and everything. She looked past all of them, found Seo-Rin's eyes through the rain and the bodies and the distance. And she said it, clearly, steadily, like someone who had been rehearsing this moment for months and had decided they were done being afraid of it. Sir, your wife faked her death. I know where she is. The rain kept falling. The cars kept running. Everything else stopped. Seo-Rin, who had not heard his wife's name spoken aloud in 5 years, who had sat at a memorial, identified personal effects, watched a casket lowered, who had rebuilt an entire criminal empire on the hollow foundation of grief because grief was the only thing that still made him feel anything, stood completely, absolutely still. His head of security said something. He didn't hear it, because the girl was still looking at him, not with fear, not with performance, with the quiet, devastating certainty of someone telling the truth. And Seo-Rin, who trusted no one and had not been surprised by anything in years, felt his entire world tilt on its axis. Welcome. If you are new here, do not move. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments. I want to see every place this story reaches. And before we go 1 second further, hit that subscribe button. Because what this girl knew, why she knew it, and what happened next is the kind of story that you will not see coming. Not once. Not even close. We are just getting started. The private office was on the 38th floor. Not his main office. That was in a different building entirely, the kind of address that appeared on legitimate business cards and fooled absolutely no one. This was the other one. The one with no company name on the door. The one where Make J1 stood outside with his hands clasped and his face arranged in the expression of a man who had seen everything and reacted to none of it. Nyla Reed sat in a chair that cost more than 3 months of her rent, which, to be fair, was not a high bar, since she currently lived in a church shelter in Mapo district that charged her 12,001 a night and had a shared bathroom with rotating hot water. She sat with her wet backpack in her lap, her soaked sneakers leaving faint damp marks on a floor that probably had a name for its material. She was not intimidated. This was the thing about Nyla Reed that nobody who looked at her ever expected. She was not intimidated by anything that could be explained. Money was explainable. Power was explainable. Men in expensive suits standing in rooms with no windows, completely explainable. She had grown up in circumstances that introduced her to fear in forms that had no explanations at all, and everything since then had felt relatively manageable by comparison. Seo-Rin sat across from her. He had taken off his suit jacket, rolled one sleeve slightly. He was 38 years old, Korean, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and was now something more complicated, sharper, quieter, carved by years of controlled emotion into something that read less like a person and more like a decision. He looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then, talk. One word. The entire weight of the room in it. Nyla reached into her backpack. The 2 security men by the door shifted slightly. She moved slowly, deliberately, not from fear, but because she understood optics and she had not come this far to be tackled by a bodyguard before she got to the good part. She pulled out a photograph, placed it on the desk between them, slid it forward, and watched Seo-Rin's face do something she suspected it had not done in a very long time. Break. Not dramatically, not with tears or sound. Just a fracture. Across the controlled surface of him, Something gave way. His jaw tightened. His eyes, which had been cold and measuring since the moment security brought her through the door, went somewhere else entirely. Somewhere private. Somewhere that had nothing to do with this room or this girl or any of the considerable power arranged around him. In the photograph, a woman, 34 years old. Korean American. Oval face, warm eyes, hair slightly shorter than he would have remembered it. She was standing outside what looked like a small market stall in Busan, holding a canvas bag, half turned toward the camera as if she'd heard something amusing just off frame. She was alive. Unmistakably, undeniably, completely alive. Seo-Rin did not touch the photograph. He stared at it. Then he looked up at Nyla. Where did you get this? Not a question. The full stop was audible. I took it, Nyla said. 18 months ago. Then again 6 months ago. Then again 3 months ago, just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. You've known for 18 months. I've been trying to figure out what to do with it for 18 months, she said. This isn't exactly the kind of thing you walk up to someone and just, she paused. Then, with considerable understatement, say. J1, standing near the window, made a sound that was not quite a word. Seo-Rin's eyes hadn't left Nyla's face. How do you know her? She found me first, Nyla said. And then she took a breath, because this was the part that required more than a sentence, and she had learned, mostly from the woman in the photograph, that some stories deserve to be told properly. But that part comes later. First you need to understand what she found. Seo-Rin sat back. Then explain it. All of it. Every word. Nyla looked at him for one moment, this powerful, grief-hollowed, dangerously still man, and thought about everything the woman in that photograph had told her, and everything she hadn't, and everything Nyla had figured out herself in the spaces between. Okay, she said. But you're not going to like the beginning. I haven't liked anything in 5 years, Seo-Rin said quietly. Keep going. If you are enjoying the story, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment. Because the reason Elysia disappeared is not what anyone is expecting. Stay with me. Her name here was Clara, Nyla said. Clara Shin. She had a full identity, ID, residence card, work history. Whoever helped her build it knew what they were doing. She didn't build it alone, Seo-Rin said. His voice was flat but his eyes were anything but. No. 3 people knew she was alive. She was one of them. She never told me who the other 2 were. Nyla pulled her backpack slightly closer. I met her in Busan. I was having what you might call a difficult season. Meaning I had $40, no working phone, no Korean, and I'd been sleeping on a bench near Horndy for 4 nights. She said it without embarrassment, the way someone states a weather condition. She sat down next to me, which, in my experience, strangers don't do when you're on a bench at that level of rough. She sat down, opened a container of food, and put half of it next to me without saying anything. Seo-Rin was very still. And then she said, in English, which nearly made me cry from relief, you look like someone who's been making impossible decisions alone for too long. And I said, yeah, you could say that. And she said, me too. The room was completely quiet. We sat there for 2 hours, Nyla continued. She didn't ask me why I was there or where I was from or any of the questions people ask when they are being nosy disguised as kind. She just talked. About Busan. About the market she worked at. About a book she was reading. Normal things. A pause. Like she was reminding me that normal things still existed. J1 cleared his throat softly near the window. Seo-Rin didn't look at him. She helped you, he said. She completely rearranged my life, Nyla said. But we'll get to that. Right now you need to hear the other part, the part about why she left. Seo-Rin's expression didn't change, but something in the set of his shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. Tell me. But wait. Because here is where everything you think you know about this story needs to be set aside. Nyla reached into the front pocket of her backpack and produced a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully, smoothed it against her knee, and placed it on the desk beside the photograph. It was a list of names. 12 of them. Korean names, 1 American name, 2 corporate entity names. Seo-Rin looked at it. Then he looked up at Nyla very slowly. Where did you get this? She gave it to me, Nyla said. 6 months ago. She said, if anything happens to me, not disappears, not goes quiet, if something actually happens to me, give this to Seo-Rin. Give him the photograph and this list. Tell him Yu Sang-min's name is at the bottom. Seo-Rin's eyes went to the bottom of the list. Yu Sang-min, former Minister of Infrastructure, current chairman of 3 separate foundations, a man whose name appeared regularly in charity programs and parliamentary discussions and absolutely never in connection with anything that could not be explained by a team of very expensive lawyers. She knew him, Seo-Rin said. It wasn't a question. She found him, Nyla said. Or rather, she found what he was hiding. And once she found it, she couldn't find it. And they couldn't let her live with what she knew. The rain outside the window intensified briefly, then softened. She chose to disappear, Nyla said carefully, because the alternative was that people she loved would die. Real people. Not just her. Seo-Rin stood up, walked to the window, stood there with his back to the room and his hands clasped behind him and said nothing for a very long time. Jae-won caught Nyla's eye and gave the smallest, most minimal shake of his head, the universal signal for do not speak right now. Nyla did not speak. Finally Seo-Rin said, still facing the window. She thought she was protecting me. Yes, Nyla said softly. For 5 years. Yes. Another long silence. She was wrong, he said. About what I could handle. I know, Nyla said. She knows too. She stopped. Just what? She loves you more than she trusts herself with your safety, Nyla said. That's not a small thing. That's an enormous, terrible, completely unreasonable thing that she has been living with for 5 years. Seo-Rin turned from the window. His face had moved past the fracture now, past the shock, past whatever complicated architecture of grief and anger was happening beneath the surface. What was left was something simpler and more dangerous. Determination. J1, he said. Sir. We leave for Busan at 6. The drive to the train station took 20 minutes. In the black car, Seo-Rin sat in the back with the photograph in his hand and the list of names in his jacket pocket and said nothing to anyone for the entire journey. Nyla sat across from him, watching Seoul move past the window in the dark, and left him to it. She had learned from Elysia that some silences were not emptiness, they were people processing things that language hadn't caught up to yet. She thought about the first time Elysia had said his name. It had been 4 months after they met. Nyla was sleeping on a proper mattress by then. A small room in a guest house that Elysia helped her find, close to the night classes Elysia had enrolled her in without making it feel like charity, which was a skill Nyla had not previously encountered and did not take lightly. They had been sitting in Elysia's small kitchen in Busan, tea going cold between them. And Elysia had been looking at a folded newspaper for a long time, not reading it, just looking at it. And finally Nyla had leaned over and seen the photograph on the page. A man. Korean. Sharp features. Dark suit. Exiting a building with the expression of someone who had made peace with never being caught off guard. You know him? Nyla had asked. And Elysia had said, very quietly, I knew him. Past tense. The most carefully chosen past tense Nyla had ever heard. Here's where it gets complicated. Because over the following months, the story came out in pieces. Not all at once. Elysia was not the kind of person who unburdened herself in one dramatic confession. She was the kind of person who trusted slowly and completely, and the trust came before the story, not the other way around. Seo-Rin. Feared through 3 districts of Seoul. Respected, if that word could stretch to cover what people felt about him, which was something closer to the respect you give a current, or a fault line. Not because he was cruel in the ways people expected powerful men to be cruel, but because he was precise. He did not make threats. He made decisions. And the decisions had consequences that arrived exactly when he said they would. And then there was the other version of him. The one Elysia described. The man who cooked badly and refused to admit it. Who read 3 newspapers every morning and argued with all of them under his breath. Who fell asleep during movies but remembered every detail of books. Who called her Eli, just Eli, 2 syllables, the most private version of her name, reserved entirely for him. He never asked me to be less than I was, Elysia had said once, watching the Busan coastline from her small window. Not once. Most people, even the ones who love you, want to adjust you a little. Sand down the edges. He just watched me. Like he was taking notes. Like he thought everything about me was information worth keeping. Nyla had said, that sounds like someone worth going back to. And Elysia had looked at her with an expression so complex it occupied several emotions simultaneously. It's also someone worth keeping alive, she'd said. Even at a cost. In the car, Seo-Rin's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. J1, from the front seat, turned slightly. It's Sang-min's office, J1 said quietly. Seo-Rin looked at the screen for a moment, then declined the call. He knows something is moving, J1 said. Good, Seo-Rin said. Let him. Nyla watched this exchange and filed it carefully. She was very good at filing things. Elysia had told her once that observation was a survival skill that most people mistook for nosiness, and that the difference was what you did with what you saw. He's going to make a move, Nyla said. Sang-min. Both men looked at her. I'm 19, not invisible, she said. If he's calling now, at this time of night, it's because something triggered a flag. Probably me. Probably showing up at the gala. You anticipated that, Seo-Rin said. Not quite a question. Elysia anticipated it, Nyla said. That's why the list exists. That's why she told me to give it to you now, not in 3 months, not when it felt safer. Now. Because the moment I made contact with you was the moment the clock started. Silence in the car. She planned this, Seo-Rin said slowly. She planned for this, Nyla corrected. There's a difference. She wasn't plotting. She was preparing. In case the time came. She hoped it wouldn't. But she prepared for it anyway. Seo-Rin looked at the photograph in his hand again. She always did that, he said, almost to himself. Prepared for the things she hoped would never happen. He said it like a memory. Like something warming up from a very cold place. Nyla looked out the window and said nothing. Some things deserve to be felt without an audience. If you are enjoying the story, this is your moment to hit the like button and subscribe. Because we are about to find out what Elysia actually discovered. And it is going to make your jaw drop. The train to Busan left at 6:47. Nyla fell asleep somewhere past Suwon and woke up to find a blanket had been placed over her, not by Seo-Rin, she was nearly certain, but possibly by J1, who she was beginning to suspect was considerably more human than his face suggested. Seo-Rin had not slept. She could tell by the way he was sitting, same position, same photograph, different quality of stillness. The stillness of someone who had spent the night with their thoughts and had not come out the other side of it yet. She sat up, pushed her locks back, looked at him. You want the rest of it, she said. I've wanted it since the gala, he said. Okay. She straightened. 5.5 years ago, Elysia was doing research. She was always doing research, Seo-Rin said. She couldn't read a restaurant menu without investigating the supply chain. I believe that completely, Nyla said. In this case, she was looking into charitable infrastructure funding. Academic interest, she said. She'd been tracking how certain government-adjacent foundations moved money, where it came from, where it went, whether the destinations matched the stated purposes. And they didn't. They did not, Nyla said. What she found was a network. Not small, significant. Spanning 4 foundations, 2 private construction firms, a logistics company, and a senior government office. Money was being routed in cycles. Development funds meant for coastal communities in the south were being quietly redirected. Not stolen exactly, redirected. Through enough legal structures that it would take a forensic accountant 3 years to trace it clearly. But she traced it. She traced it in 4 months because she is Elysia and she doesn't sleep when she's working, Nyla said. The name at the center of all of it was you, Sang-min. Seo-Rin's jaw tightened. She took the evidence to a journalist she trusted, Nyla continued. The journalist agreed to run the story. But before it could be published, the journalist was pressured. Aggressively. The piece was killed. The journalist was moved to a regional office 2 days later. Sang-min got to the paper. He owns 2 of the people who own the paper, Nyla said. That's the thing about him. He's not in the room, he's in the people in the room. Elysia realized the story was buried. And then she realized something worse. They knew it was her. Someone inside the journalist's team identified her as the source. Within 48 hours, she started noticing things. A car outside the apartment for 3 days. 2 calls from numbers she didn't recognize. A conversation with a colleague that felt off, the kind of off you can't explain but can't dismiss. Seo-Rin was perfectly still. She came to me first, he said quietly. Didn't she? Nyla hesitated. She wanted to, she said carefully. She told me she sat in her car outside your building for an hour. And then she thought about what would happen if she walked in and told you everything. What you would do. I would have destroyed Sang-minute, Seo-Rin said. Simple as weather. Yes, Nyla said. And in doing that, you would have exposed yourself. Your operations. Everything you'd built. And Sang-minute, who had been waiting for years for a legitimate reason to go after the CHA organization, would have had everything he needed. She wasn't protecting you from a fight. She was protecting you from a war that he had already prepared for and you hadn't. Silence. The train moved through countryside, green and early morning pale. She thought she was the safest option, Seo-Rin said. She thought she was the only option, Nyla said. If she was dead, there was nothing connecting the evidence to anyone living. The network had no reason to pursue a ghost. And you had no reason to come looking for information about a dead woman's research. She protected everyone by removing herself, Seo-Rin said. Yes. And spent 5 years. Alive, Nyla said firmly. She was alive, Seo-Rin. She built a life. She worked. She found things to love about where she was. But, she stopped. But what? She never stopped, Nyla said. That's the part one thing you need to understand before you see her. She never stopped. She followed every interview you gave. Kept newspaper clippings about the CHA organization like some people keep journals. She knew about the infrastructure deal you closed in Incheon last March. She knew when you canceled the charity board position in February. She knew things about your life that she had no business knowing because she spent 5 years learning them from a distance because that was the only way she was allowed to be near you. Seo-Rin turned away, looked out the window. His reflection in the glass showed an expression that had no name, grief and anger and something raw underneath both of them that was not either of those things. She never stopped, he repeated. Very quietly. Not for a single day, Nyla said. But wait, here's the part of this story that will make you stop breathing. Because this is where Nyla's role in all of it becomes clear. And it is not what you think. She didn't find me by accident, Nyla said. The train was pulling into Busan. Dawn light, pink and thin, was beginning to touch the coastline outside the window. Jae-won had gone to get coffee from the dining car and had not yet returned, which Nyla suspected was intentional. Seo-Rin turned from the window. What do you mean? I mean she knew who I was before she sat down next to me on that bench, Nyla said. It took me a while to figure that out. About 8 months in. I found a photograph in her kitchen. I wasn't snooping, it fell out of a book she'd lent me. I wasn't snooping. What was in the photograph? Me, Nyla said. From about 2 years before I met her. In Detroit. Standing outside the community center on Grayshot Avenue where I used to volunteer when I was 17. Seo-Rin was very still. She'd been tracking you, he said. She'd been tracking my mother, Nyla said. And here her voice shifted, just slightly. Not breaking. Nyla Reed did not break in front of people. But something in it changed, the way light changes when a cloud moves. My mother worked for Sang-minite's foundation. Not in a significant role, she was administrative support, data entry. She'd been with them for 3 years. She was good at her job. She noticed things. She found the same network. She found the edges of it. She didn't know what she was looking at. She wasn't a researcher. She wasn't trained in that. But she knew something was wrong with the numbers she was entering and she made notes. Personal notes, in a small book she kept at home. A pause. She died before she could do anything with them. Carbon monoxide leak in our apartment. Ruled accidental. The words landed in the silence of the train car like stones in still water. How old were you? Seo-Rin said. 16, Nyla said. The notes disappeared with everything else. I ended up in the system. Aged out at 18. Came to Seoul because a church exchange program offered transport and I had nothing left in Detroit that was worth staying for. She said all of it steadily. Not performing strength, Just applying it, the way someone applies pressure to a wound. Practiced. Necessary. Elysia found out about my mother 2 years before she found me, Nyla continued. She was cross-referencing. Looking for other people who'd been close to information Sang-Minute would want buried. My mother's name came up. And then her daughter's name came up. And then her daughter's daughter showed up on a bench in Busan with $40 and no phone. She found you on purpose, Seo-Rin said. She found me because she felt responsible, Nyla said. She couldn't save my mother. She didn't even know about my mother until it was too late. But she found me. And she decided that counted for something. A long silence. She never told you, Seo-Rin said. Not directly. But I figured it out eventually. And when I confronted her about it, she said, I was going to tell you when you were ready. I was waiting for you to be ready. And I said, how would you know when I was ready? And she said, Nyla's mouth curved slightly. The same way I knew you were ready for the night classes. The same way I knew you were ready to stop sleeping on that bench. You start reaching for things instead of just surviving them. I've been watching you reach. Seo-Rin was looking at Nyla with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not assessment. Not suspicion. Something closer to recognition. She talks about you, he said. In the clippings. In the notes she made. She talks about you constantly, Nyla said. To me. About you. She calls you. She stopped herself. Shook her head. That part is hers to tell you. What does she call me? That, Nyla said firmly, is hers to tell you. For the first time in the entire conversation, possibly for the first time in a very long time, Seo-Rin almost smiled. The cabin was 40 minutes outside Busan proper. A mountain road that became a track that became a path. The kind of place that required intention to find and offered, in exchange, the complete absence of everything Seoul was made of. Jae-won drove. Nyla sat in the back with Seo-Rin and watched him get quieter with every kilometer, not colder, not more controlled. Just quieter. The way a person gets quiet when they are preparing to feel something enormous and they want to do it with some kind of dignity. She thought about what Elysia had said to her, the morning Nyla finally told her she was going to Seoul. You're going to see him. Not angry. Not frightened. Just certain. Someone has to, Nyla had said. The list is getting old. Sang-Minute is still moving. And you've been hiding long enough. I'm not hiding, Elysia had said. I'm waiting. For what? A long pause. For the right moment. For it to be safe enough. For permission, Nyla had said. You're waiting for permission that isn't coming because the only person who can give it doesn't know you need it. Elysia had looked at her for a long time. When did you get so sharp? She'd said finally. I had a good teacher, Nyla had said. If you are enjoying this story, comment right now. Tell me, Team Elysia or Team Nyla. Because both of these women are carrying this entire story on their backs and they deserve their flowers. Subscribe if you haven't. We are almost at the door. The cabin appeared through the trees. Small. Stone-built, partially. A wooden addition on one side. A garden that was clearly tended with care, not a decorative garden, a working one, with herbs and vegetables in organized rows and a small bench near a tree that had clearly been sat on many times. Smoke from a chimney. Morning light. A completely ordinary scene. Jae-won stopped the car at the edge of the path. I'll wait here, he said. No one had asked him to. He simply knew. Nyla got out. Looked at the cabin. Then at Seo-Rin. You don't need me for this part, she said. No, he agreed. He was looking at the cabin with an expression that occupied the specific territory between longing and terror. She's going to be nervous, Nyla said. She acts like she isn't, but she is. She's been rehearsing this moment for 5 years and none of the rehearsals went the way she wanted. Neither did mine, he said quietly. He walked forward. Nyla leaned against the car and watched him go and thought about all the things that had to happen, exactly as they happened, for this moment to exist. A bench in Busan. A fallen newspaper. A list of names. A church shelter in Mapo. A charity gala in the rain. A 19-year-old girl from Detroit who had learned, from a woman who had lost everything and rebuilt it quietly, that the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to let important things stay buried. Seo-Rin reached the door. He raised his hand to knock. The door opened before he could. She had heard the car. Of course she had, Elysia Hart, who had survived 5 years in hiding by noticing everything, heard a car on a mountain path that never had cars and understood immediately what it meant. She had been standing in the kitchen with her hand on the counter for 4 minutes before she made herself walk to the door. She opened it. And there he was. Older. A little. The way she was older, not aged, exactly, but deepened. Like a color that has been left in light long enough to become more itself. He looked at her. She looked at him. 5 years of grief. 5 years of letters she never sent and clippings she kept in a box, and mornings she woke up thinking about coffee and newspapers and arguments and a name that sounded like home. 5 years on his side of a dark room where he had rebuilt an empire brick by brick because putting things together was the only answer he had to the fact that everything had come apart. Neither of them spoke. The morning light came through the trees. A bird somewhere in the garden. The smell of whatever was on her stove, drifting out through the open door. Finally she said, very quietly, "You're older." And Seo-Rin, who had not cried at the memorial, had not cried when the casket was lowered, had not cried through 5 years of a grief so compressed it had powered an entire criminal empire, laughed. It came out broken. Half laugh, half something else entirely. And then the something else took over. He pressed his hand to the doorframe and let his head drop and cried. Actually cried. The way people cry when they've been holding it for so long that when it finally comes it has years of pressure behind it. Elysia stepped forward and put her hand on his face and said nothing. Because there was nothing to say that the moment wasn't already saying. He straightened. Looked at her. Eyes red. Expression stripped down to something she recognized. The version of him that only she had ever seen. The one underneath all of it. "You let me think you were dead," he said. "I know. For 5 years. I know. I identified your belongings." Her jaw tightened. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so. I reorganized 3 departments of my operation," he said, "because I couldn't walk past certain offices without." He stopped. "I changed the city car fleet. Because you used to complain about the old ones and every time I got in one I could hear you complaining and I couldn't." Seo-Rin. Of course she had. "I kept your books," he said. "All of them. They're still on the shelf. I haven't moved them." She made a sound that was not quite a word. 5 years, he said. "And you watched from a distance." "Every day," she whispered. "You should have told me," he said. "You should have trusted me with it." "I know," she said. "I was trying to keep you alive." "I wasn't alive," he said. Simple. Devastating. "Eli, I was not alive." She put both hands on his face. He closed his eyes. They stood in the doorway of a mountain cabin in the morning light and held the accumulated weight of 5 years between them and did not put it down yet, just held it together, which was different from carrying it alone. Entirely different. From the car at the edge of the path, Nyla watched. Then she looked at J1, who was looking very carefully at a fixed point in the middle distance with suspiciously bright eyes. "You knew," she said, "didn't you, that she was alive?" J1 was quiet for a very long moment. "I suspected," he said carefully, "for about 2 years. I never confirmed it. I decided I didn't want to know for certain, because if I knew, I would have to tell him. And she had made a decision that I wasn't sure I had the right to override." "But you never stopped him from grieving." "No," J1 said quietly. "That I regret. Every day." Nyla looked back at the cabin. "It's over now," she said. "No," J1 said. "Sangminute is still." "I mean the grief part is over," Nyla said. "The Sangminute part." She glanced at the cabin, where the door was still open, where 2 people were still standing in the morning light. "That part, I think, is about to begin." They sat in Elysia's kitchen for 3 hours. Tea. Actual food. She had cooked, the way she apparently cooked every morning. Methodically and well. The table was small. Seo-Rin took up more of the room than it was designed for and adjusted without comment. Nyla sat at the corner, eating everything put in front of her, and listened. They talked. Not about everything. Some things were clearly being saved, stored up for later when the immediate crisis had passed and they could afford to sit with the details. But enough. 5 years of enough, coming out in pieces over a kitchen table in the mountains. And then Seo-Rin put down his cup and said, "The list Nyla gave me. Sangminut's network. I have people who can move on this." "I know," Elysia said. The evidence you gathered, is it still intact? Copies in 3 locations, she said. Digital and physical. I'm not a person who leaves one copy of anything. No, he said. You never were. I can dismantle what he built, Seo-Rin said. Quietly. Through channels that won't require you to surface publicly. You wouldn't need to testify. You wouldn't need to appear. And I would stay here, she said. For a while. Indefinitely. No, he said. She looked at him. Elysia. He leaned forward slightly. You just told me you spent 5 years watching from a distance because you believed that was the only option. I am telling you, as the person you were allegedly protecting, that it was not the only option. It was never the only option. You made a decision for me without consulting me. I understand why. I am not, he stopped. Exhaled. I am working on not being furious about it. How's that going? She said carefully. Poorly, he said. But I am working on it. Her mouth moved. Almost a smile. The question, he said, is not how long you stay hidden. The question is what you want. What do you actually want, Eli? Not what is safe. Not what protects everyone else. What do you want? The kitchen was quiet. Outside, wind in the trees. The garden in morning light. I want my life back, she said. Simply. Completely. Then we take it back, he said. Together. That is non-negotiable. You can't just. I can, he said. Watch me. Seo-Rin. Eli. His voice dropped. Lost its precision. Became something quieter and far more dangerous in a different way. I changed the cars. I kept the books. I have had 5 years of practice at finding reasons to keep going and none of them were as good as this one. So please do not argue with me about whether we can manage Sang-minute. We can manage Sang-minute. What I cannot manage is one more day of you being a ghost when you are very clearly, very thoroughly, completely alive. She looked at him for a long time. Then she reached across the small table and took his hand. Okay, she said. One word. The full weight of the room in it. Nyla, at the corner, looked at her tea and said absolutely nothing and was very busy not crying. Here's where it gets satisfying. Because Sang-minute never saw Nyla read coming. He had been watching Seo-Rin for years. He had been watching Alysia's disappearance for years. He had been watching powerful men and women and political structures and financial channels. He had, in short, been watching everything that looked like a threat. He had not been watching a 19-year-old girl from Detroit who worked odd jobs and lived in a church shelter and observed everything and missed nothing. While Seo-Rin and Elysia were in that mountain kitchen, while J1 was making calls from the car, Nyla had already sent 3 encrypted files to 2 journalists and 1 government whistleblower contact that Elysia had given her 6 months ago just in case. The just in case had arrived. By the time Sang-minute's office called Seo-Rin's phone for the 3rd time that morning, the files were already with people who could not be bought because they did not know who was sending them. They just knew what the files contained. And what the files contained was enough. 1 year later, the bookstore cafe was called Untold. Alysia's idea. Nyla had rolled her eyes at it for approximately 48 hours and then admitted it was perfect. It sat on a quiet street in Mapo, not far, as it happened, from the church shelter where Nyla had paid $12,001 a night and shared a bathroom with rotating hot water. The building had been a print shop previously. The renovation took 4 months. The bookshelves were second-hand and mismatched and organized by mood rather than genre, which Elysia had insisted on and which turned out to be the thing customers mentioned most in reviews. Elysia ran it. Nyla helped manage it 3 afternoons a week, around her university schedule. She was studying law, which surprised exactly no one who had spent any time around her. She had received a scholarship, anonymous, administered through a university foundation, no strings attached. She had accepted it without too many questions because she had learned that some gifts were given cleanly and the correct response was simply to use them well. J1 came in every Tuesday for the same order and sat at the same table near the window and read for an hour, which Elysia had pointed out was probably the most relaxed anyone had ever seen him, and which he denied with characteristic absence of expression. Sang-minute had resigned from his foundation chairmanships in March. Quietly, with a statement about health and the desire to spend more time with family, which fooled no one but provided a usable exit. 2 of the 12 names on Nyla's list had been formally investigated. One had cooperated with authorities in exchange for reduced consequences. The network was not destroyed. These things are never fully destroyed, but it was disrupted. Significantly, irreversibly. The coastal communities in the south had received an emergency infrastructure review. It was not perfect, but it was real. On a Thursday afternoon in autumn, a customer came into Untold, a young woman, university-aged, wearing a law school jacket, and looked around the shelves with the expression of someone who had been told this place was worth finding. Nyla was behind the small counter, going over an invoice. "Can I help you?" "Someone told me this place organizes by mood," the girl said. "Is that actually true?" "Completely," Nyla said. "What mood are you in?" The girl thought. "Something that feels like getting through." Nyla came around the counter and led her to a shelf near the window, mid-height, slightly worn at the corners, with a small handwritten label that said Survival, the Quiet Kind. The girl looked at the shelf, pulled out a book, smiled. From the back of the shop, where Elysia was unpacking a delivery of new stock, Seo-Rin appeared, jacket off, sleeves rolled, carrying a box of books with the expression of a man who had made peace with the fact that this was now part of his Thursday afternoons and had, quietly, come to prefer it to most other things. He set the box down near the counter, looked at Nyla. "The Gwanghwaman order came in," he said. "Finally," she said. "Also," he held up a small wrapped package, "the one you asked her to set aside." Nyla took it, looked at the title. "Perfect." "What is it?" "None of your business," she said cheerfully. He gave her a look of mild reproof that had absolutely no effect on her whatsoever, which she suspected he had by now accepted. The girl with the law school jacket was still at the window shelf, flipping through pages. The late afternoon light came through the glass in long warm angles, falling across the mismatched shelves and the worn wooden floor and the small chalkboard menu above the counter. Elysia came out from the back. Noticed the customer. Caught Seo-Rin's eye across the room. He tilted his head toward the girl. "She's looking for something," the gesture said. Elysia nodded and went to help. Nyla watched this silent exchange, the two of them communicating across a room in the vocabulary of people who have known each other so long that words are optional, and felt something settle in her chest that she was still getting used to. The specific warmth of being in a place where you belong. Not invited. Not accommodated. Actually belonging. The customer eventually looked up from the shelf and found Nyla still behind the counter. "How did all this happen?" she asked, gesturing at the shop, at the shelves and the people and the warm, improbable Thursdayness of it. "Like, how does a place like this exist?" Nyla looked at Elysia, who was smiling at something the girl with the law jacket had said. Looked at Seo-Rin, who was reading the back of a book with his glasses slightly crooked and his expression completely unguarded, which was the version of him she'd decided she liked best. "A lot of people think miracles arrive loudly," Nyla said. "The biggest one I ever saw arrived carrying grief." The customer nodded slowly. Like that made sense. Like that made every kind of sense. Every missing person leaves behind two stories. The story of where they went, and the story of what happened while they were gone. Elysia's heart went somewhere quiet. Somewhere she could be a ghost and love from a distance and keep people alive by removing herself from their proximity. She built a small life and filled it with purpose and told herself it was enough. It wasn't enough. She knew it wasn't enough. But it was what she had, and she made it beautiful anyway, because that was simply who she was. Seo-Rin stayed in a city that reminded him of her on every corner. He built things and closed deals and ran operations and came home to shelves of books he couldn't move and an absence so familiar it had almost become company. Almost. Nyla Reed arrived in Seoul with $40 and the notebook her mother never got to use. She didn't know what she was going to do with it. She just knew she wasn't going to let the wrong people win. 3 people. 3 separate griefs. One 19-year-old girl who stepped into the rain outside a charity gala and said the sentence that changed everything. Sometimes we only get to hear one version of the story. And sometimes the untold chapters are the ones that matter most. Perhaps one day, we'll visit those chapters too. That is the story. And if it stayed with you, if you found yourself holding your breath somewhere along the way, if Nyla made you want to stand up and cheer, if the reunion in that mountain cabin doorway did something to your chest that you weren't fully prepared for. Tell me about it in the comments. Who was your favorite character? Was it Nyla, who walked into the rain with nothing but the truth? Elysia, who loved from a distance for 5 years and called it protection. Or Seo-Rin, who kept the books on the shelf and changed the cars and was not alive until he was. Drop your answer below. I read every single one. Subscribe if this is your first time here, because this is the kind of story we tell on this channel. Human, complicated, emotional, and real in all the ways that matter. Like this video if you believe that the truth always deserves to come out. Even when it's late. Even when it arrives in the rain. And share it with one person today who needs to be reminded that the people who love us sometimes do impossible things to keep us safe, and that the bravest thing we can do is let them come home. See you in the next story.